This is episode 12 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and in this episode, Michael and I discuss why you should get into Avatar the Last Airbender. Welcome again to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and I'm joined today with Michael, who is actually going to be taking the reins today as he tries to convince me to get more invested in Avatar the Last Airbender, which I did not grow up watching. We'll get to that in a minute. I watched it as an adult, but watched more Korra than Avatar, actually, probably. But we'll address that in a minute. I'll let Michael take the lead from here.
Awesome, thanks. So before we begin talking about Avatar the Last Bender, what we always do in every podcast is share something that we want to recommend. So one thing I would like to recommend to the audience is the Canis trilogy. Let's
It
see.
makes me think of werewolves. Am I in the right?
Nope.
Nope.
It's by
That's like
James. It's written by James Islington. Sorry if I mispronounce his last name. He's only written 4 books, and three of those 4 books is this trilogy. And if you ever heard of the book series or the television show on Amazon called Wheel of Time, are you a little hesitant about getting invested in 15 book series? Then you might want to try this series to see if you like it, because it's very it definitely takes a lot of themes from the Wheel of Time books into this in this trilogy. So it's very similar. So if you want,
is it the same franchise?
it's both fantasy novels, different authors,
But not the same franchise, just the same genre and author?
same genre. Yeah.
Right.
So I really liked it.
That
I
is a
thought it
selling
was,
point to me.
yeah. I really liked the series. I thought it was really fun. Right now I'm almost done with the second book, but I would highly recommend it.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been curious about Wheel of Time, but for the same reason as the Cosmere books, like it's just so many books to get invested in that not the thing I have the bandwidth for at the moment, but a trilogy I can get behind. And
Yeah,
actually, that's a perfect segue for my recommendation, unless you have more to say on yours.
nope. Let's continue on.
So my recommendation is based on a recommendation that was given to me by a patient who's a big Star Wars fan, and she recommended to me first an Ahsoka book, but also the Thrawn trilogy. Now, there's a Thrawn trilogy that's part of the Legends canon that kind of got the back burner, whatever, when Disney took over. But the Thrawn trilogy that she recommended for me is in line with the canon of Rebels and Clone Wars and all that. I've only read the first book of it so far, but I got an additional Audible credit today that I can finally purchase the third Thrawn book, which was what I was waiting for. I didn't want to start the trilogy over or any of that until I had all 3 books in hand, so to speak, or in my Audible library.
Now, how much of a Star Wars fan are you, and how much does this satisfy that need, or does it not really feel like a Star Wars book?
So we'll actually get into this in a future episode because I'm meeting with a couple of I call them my Star Wars gurus to discuss the future of Star Wars, which it could be a very controversial, but also very exciting episode. Probably coming out in March or April. But I mean, I grew up watching the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, but my dad was more of a Trekkie than a Star Wars fan, even though our family enjoyed both. But the biggest thing for me is that I loved Rebels, and Thrawn is just such a chilling villain, and his portrayal in Ahsoka was I jaw dropping. I loved it, and the first of the trilogy that I've already watched, or already read, just gives such backstory and just like insight into how his brain works that in some ways it gives me more empathy for the character, and in some ways it makes him more chilling. So I'm excited to read the other two books, and I might be recommending this one again once I can actually recommend the other two books. But I can at least recommend the first one. And it's a
Sounds
good
great.
standalone book too, just saying.
Yeah.
Because you've
If
read it as well, right?
I've read it too. So if you like Sherlock Holmes or any type of like mystery novels, I feel like that scratches this itch because like
Yeah.
Don is just so intelligent and he's just like feels
Yeah,
so
Sherlock's a good
superior.
comparison.
Hmm.
Especially I mean, all Sherlock Holmes, I'm sure, but if you ever watched the BBC Sherlock, it's kind of the same insight that they give Benedict Cumberbatch, all the little, but because of how Thrawn's brain works and just how his species is physiologically, I think they even see in infrared was part of it. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that.
And I really liked listening to the book because
Voice
the
actor,
the voice actors is really good and it has like Star Wars music in the background.
context, and oh,
And
can't
then
recommend
when
it enough.
And then what I really liked is when Thrawn is thinking to himself, you can tell that he's thinking to himself because the noise in the noise that's happening or the music that's happening while he's like dialoguing to himself. So it's very interesting to like hear the difference between him talking to someone else versus him talking to thinking to himself. So
Okay, we could probably go off on that one, but that's just my
yeah.
recommendation. And
So
we got
let's
a
get
bit of
into
time to
why.
record. We'll probably we could both listen to that book again and discuss the book itself on a future episode. So let's
Yeah,
move on.
yeah,
Back to
let's do that. So let's go into So of course the reason why we're doing this podcast episode is because the live action is premiering on February 22nd, just in a couple of days. Or if you're watching this late, it just happened.
Yeah, this
But
podcast episode is going to release the same week that the live action series releases,
Mhm.
basically.
So before we go into our debate, do you mind, Spencer, going into your history of Avatar? I know you mentioned it just briefly, but like do you mind going to like talking about a little bit more, like who recommended it and why you watched it and your feelings?
Yeah, so, well, and first, and just to make this clear, we're kind of doing this in honor of the live action series coming out, but we're not discussing the live action series, the movie we don't talk about, or this episode is in honor of the live action series coming out, but it is about the cartoon. So we are going to withhold judgment on the live action series with all the rumors and whatever that have come about. That's content for a future episode or a future blog post. Today, just the cartoon.
Yep.
But yeah, my history in 2 minutes or less. So the thing that you got to understand about growing up in Canada is that we get like certain shows syndicated, not all of them, and living on the western side of Canada, the shows all came out on those syndicated youth kids channels, usually in Eastern time. So even if a show was like was on at 6 o'clock, it was, oh gosh, I can't even do the math right now. Basically, sometimes shows that were even kid appropriate came on after my bedtime because that's just how the time zones and channels worked. So honestly, in a lot of ways, I just didn't have a chance to watch Avatar as a kid. I saw commercials, I remember it, but whether my allotted TV time was prioritized by Digimon and Pokemon or Disney, or whether it was on too late for me to watch, it just didn't happen. But then when I was in college, my roommates at BYU one summer, back when Netflix did DVDs, they like binged a whole, I don't even know, I don't know if it was a whole series or portion of it, but I caught episodes here and there. I remember shoot, what's it called? The play, the
Oh yeah, the
Ember
Fire
Island
Nation
Players.
play about everything that happened in the series.
Ember Island Players. Oh, I'm gonna get some flack for this. But yeah, I saw like bits and pieces and got intrigued about it, but just again, never really crossed my radar at the right time. And then when I was working with guys with mental disabilities, one of my guys really wanted to watch um Avatar and Legend of Korra with me, but he put me onto Legend of Korra because I'd seen parts of Avatar, and I don't always try to understand the way that his brain worked. I just kind of went along for the ride as to why we watched this or that. But he really wanted me to watch it. So I did, and I liked Korra well enough, but still just didn't cross my radar until it hit Netflix. When it hit Netflix, I'm thinking, okay, my friends love this. I know so many people that love Avatar and swear by it. Let's do this. So I watched all of Avatar the Last Airbender and all of Legend of Korra and enjoyed it, but it didn't sell me in the same way that many of my friends just adore it. And it's probably in part the nostalgia factor. So part of today is just Michael's going to try to convince me not to give it another chance, but just to get more invested in the franchise. Because I enjoyed it. I just didn't have the heartfelt connection that many of our other contributors have here. Okay, I think that was definitely more than 2 minutes. But Michael, your history with Avatar, 2 minutes or less. See if you
Yeah,
find.
yeah, that's totally fine. So I started watching this series from day one. Like I remember there was commercials on Nickelodeon advertising this new show called Avatar the Last Bender. I remember my friends and I we talked about watching the show. And it was we didn't talk about watching the show together. We just talked about watching the show at our own houses, and then we'd come and talk about it. And then we watched the first two episodes because I think they released the first two episodes when it was released. And then the Nickelodeon just kept replaying those two episodes. And so we kept watching those same two episodes. And then it became three episodes, and then they kept replaying those same three episodes, and then the three became four, and so on and so forth. And we just loved this series from that. And we would quote the series to each other, like Secret Tunnels. We'd seen that in high school even. And we just were dorks about it because we just enjoyed watching the show because it was just a fun show that had action. It had a good storyline, character development, and all these things that we just well, we probably didn't realize, but what made a good show a good show. And so, like right now, I'm actually watching Avatar: The Last Airbender with my wife and this is her first time watching the series. So we'll see what she thinks after she finishes the show.
I know she talked about writing a guest post for us. I would love for her to write a guest post for us about her impressions after watching it the first time all the way through.
It might take a long time because we don't have that much time together. So we watch the series together as a couple, and that really happens.
That happens
But
when we have two little kids,
yeah,
so
exactly.
understandable. That happens with us too.
So, all right, so that's my history with Avatar. So let's go into the the explanations of why I think this is a great show
Yeah,
and why
convince me to get more invested.
yeah, and why you should be more invested. And the first one's going to be a low ball one, but I think it's really
Oh,
cool that this
definitely.
is happening, especially with the upcoming live action occurring. So one of the best side characters or like
Recurring gag.
yeah, recurring gag is the cabbage merchant.
My God,
And
yes.
yeah, like just think about how like evil Aang and the gang are because they keep on destroying this guy's cabbages, and he's probably not realizing the whole story. Just if you think of
Well,
his,
definitely not.
yeah, if you just think of his like his daily life, and he's just trying to get away from these ruffians who always destroy his cabbages, and wherever he goes, there they are destroying his cabbages over and over and over again.
Look, over the course of visiting the four nations, or I can't remember how it's all the world's divided up, but like the whole world, they're traveling over and always somehow ends up in the wrong place.
Yep. And it's just comedic relief, and I just love that. And I think one of my favorite lines from him is when we first introduced to him, they destroy his cabbages, and Aang and the gang are arrested, and he tells their Earth Nation leader, saying, "Oh, one head for each head of cabbages should be lost." So he's expecting like them to die because they destroyed his cabbages. And I thought that was like he's just a fun reoccurring character. And what I really like is James C, that the voice actor for the Cabbage Merchant, he's going to reprise that role in the live action show.
That's just wonderful. So that's one of the things that I knew about Avatar from memes and stuff before it hit Netflix. And I loved the Cabbage Merchant before I ever saw the show properly. And I mean, last year for our Green St. Patrick's Day, you did a blog post on it, and it's just wonderful. Like, who doesn't love the Cabbage Merchant?
And there's so much like fan fiction about the Cabbage
Oh,
Merchant.
really?
Like, yeah, like there's people have come up with creative stories about the Cabbage Merchant and how gets his revenge on Aang and the gang, or not
Okay,
knowing that
Simon,
he's the
blog post
Avatar.
assignment for you is to find a few of your favorites and recommend them.
Sounds good. But that's my first point of like why you should be invested, because there's this like if the side character's that great, then that means all the characters are great.
Oh, yes.
Hmm. And that leads up to my next point. One of your favorite shows is Digimon Adventures.
Digimon period, but yes, Digimon
Digimon,
Adventure is where it all began.
hmm and I love Digimon Adventures too. Um, and then after Digimon, the first season or the first group of
Digimon
kids,
Adventure 02, season 2.
yeah, they became a new group of kids in 02. And I think one of the most interesting characters, and you probably agree with me, is Ken Ichijoji.
Ichijoji, or that's the American way that they said it. Someone who speaks Japanese is probably cringing at me right now.
Yeah. But like why is he such a good character?
I mean, and I have mental blog posts planned to dive into this, of course, because I have mental blog posts about everything that may or may not actually come to fruition. But he goes through this character arc, and I'm sure you're leading into Zuko here, that he realizes just how awful he's been, and he does everything he knows how to make amends and redeem himself. And when once he was the enemy, the antagonist, like the antithesis to the Digidestin, in the end, he becomes like, in a way, at some points, they're saving grace that they could not have won some of the later battles without him.
And I really just think it's interesting because like he's the first arc villain, and then for the rest of the series, like he goes through this redemption arc where he feels like he's not worthy to be redeemed, but yet he wants to try his best to help other people or to help fix the digital world. And then he always reflects like, oh, he's the reason why the digital world is so messed up. And like you can see the
Himself the
trauma
rest of
that
the
that
series.
builds. And that leads up to like Zuko, who is renowned to have one of the best redemption arcs in the entire series. Like there's 3 seasons of Avatar the Last Airbender, and 2 of those seasons, so 2/3 of the show, he is the enemy, and he's out to get Aang.
Well,
And there
isn't it
comes
like
a
the
point,
first season, he's searching for Aang. The second season, he's kind of an outlaw himself, and then the third season is his redemption.
Yeah, but he's still like kind of out for Aang in the second season.
Yeah.
And even in the second season where he's just like an outlaw, like there's a point where he's in jail with Sakura, and he's able, like, he has to make a choice to either help Sakura or help his family or help the Fire Nation. And he chose the Fire Nation over helping the good guys.
Mhm.
And because of that, that leads to Sakura not trusting Zuko when he is part of the gang and is trying to help Aang master firebending. And it's just so beautiful just to see how Zuko feels, how Sakura feels, how Aang feels, and all these other characters feel when Zuko has changed.
Just the forgiveness that it all goes into it.
Mm-hmm. Which leads up to my next point of like how each characters is so complex. Like it's not like one of those kid shows where every character is like, oh, you used to be bad, but now you're good, and we don't know why you're good, but we trust you that you're good. So yay, we have another good guy. Let's go beat the final boss. Do la 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 la. But each character has their own perspective and their own like character development, and they use the 3 seasons to be able to stretch that forth and to like build these characters. For example, like even though Sokka is known for his comedy relief, um, he still has a lot of serious moments. How to be a leader and to be a warrior, even though he has no abilities or no bending powers. Also, there's no Mary Sue type characters. Like you could easily say Aang and Katara could be Mary Sue's, but they also are,
They've got their traumas that they have to work through.
yeah, they have traumas that they have to work through. Aang really just wants to have fun and play around, but yet he like knows that he has to do something he doesn't want to do. Katara seems very motherly and tries to be her best, but also she learns blood bending and she has to forgive
Oh,
Zuko, and she doesn't want to. So she does all these things, and she steals at one point too. And then even like the more like the most Christ-like character is Iroh, and technically he's a bad guy at the first season. Like he's there to capture the Avatar. I would put quotes around that, but he's trying to help his nephew capture
well,
the
yeah, his
Avatar.
allegiance has always been to Zuko, not to the Fire Nation, right?
Yeah.
And then let's also talk about just his physical transformation from dad bod to I was gonna try to make a bad pun, but like he gets jacked. So
Mm-hmm.
what's the physical transformation to go along with it? Like
Yep.
Pyro is like dad bod goals.
Exactly. And even though even though the story is very like good versus evil, they still blur those lines of what means to be good and what means to be evil. Uh like the episode with Jet, like the Fire Nation really destroyed his family and done horrible things. And so Jet is trying to get revenge back on a Fire Nation village. So it's like these gray areas that they try to explore and try not, but luckily the game knows like, all right, this is wrong. They explore gray areas, but they still recognize that these gray areas uh should not happen
Well,
the
and if
way
I
that they do.
recall correctly, like even when Aang, when Appa gets kidnapped, like Aang loses control and goes Avatar state, and to oversimplify it, he loses his temper and he knows it's wrong, but he's still a good guy,
Yep.
even after he's I don't remember what the aftermath of him in the Avatar state is, if people died or whatever, but he he owned up to his mistakes, right? Like he realized that that wasn't going to solve the problem, that doing the bad thing wasn't going to save Appa.
Yep. And then finally, like one thing that like I don't like about Digimon that much is uh hear me out.
Be careful what you say next.
Is usually there's only like one or two characters in the end that faces the main villain because they are stronger than the rest of the team because they can't like evolve up. Their Digimon can't evolve to the same state that they can.
Fair enough. That was the
But
big critique of the Digimon Adventure 2020 reboot is Matt and Ty got all the attention and all the powers, and everyone else is like, hi, I'm also here.
yeah,
Didn't even get full Digivolution sequences except for those two.
yeah. I think the movies did better, but I haven't seen them all, so
But that's a conversation for another time. But yes,
yeah.
the Team Avatar was pretty well balanced. They all had their strengths.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at Aang, yeah, he can master all four elements, but he couldn't do blood bending like Katara, or he couldn't really manipulate metal bending like
Invented
Toph.
metal bending. That's one thing I remember.
Mhm.
There's no
So they all
metal bending. Like, no, let me invent it for you then, guys.
exactly like so even though he has abilities, he can't do everything, or he hasn't learned everything that like those that are emphasized in one element can do.
Yeah, in some ways, like even though the Avatar is like the most powerful bender, the Avatar is still a jack of all trades, master of none.
Mm-hmm. So I still believe Toph could take Aang out if she wants to with her metal bending powers. But anyway, that's a different discussion.
Well, there's memes about like if Toph was the Avatar and it's just desolation.
That's true. But I think those are 5 good reasons why you should give Avatar another try and be a little bit more invested in the show.
We got the Cabbage Merchant, Zuko's redemption, the complexity of the characters, the oh shoot, what's the word I'm looking for? The ambiguity of good and evil, that gray area, and just well balanced characters and character development in general. Like everyone gets their screen time, even a lot of the recurring background characters.
Exactly. Most importantly, the Cabbage Merchant.
I'm looking forward to those fan fictions. Okay. Um, I'm going to throw this question at you, and I want you to answer just the first one that comes to your mind, since we have another minute or two before we run out of recording time. If you had to pick one filler episode that is worth every second, which one would you watch? Filler episodes.
Filler episodes.
Because that was one of my biggest issues was the filler episodes, but that's any cartoon or anime. There's a lot of filler usually.
See, I feel like there isn't that much filler episodes in Avatar. The one that comes to mind that I thought was nice was in season 3 when they go to the play.
The Ember Island, whatever it's called.
And they see the play about themselves. I thought that was funny because it does a good job recapping the whole series with a little bit twists on each one, making Aang and the Gain evil.
Well, and it also, now that I'm thinking about it, it gives them a chance of self-reflection that, like, oh, is that really what I'm like? Because it makes them all a caricature of their real selves because they're being seen from the enemy perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Toph, who's played by this big old man, muscle man.
Yeah.
And she loves it, of course.
And then, like, and it also makes fun of the Great Divide episode, which is known to be the worst episode in Avatar.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like there's one episode that.
Well, I remember the Great Divide.
Yeah, it's known as the worst episode because like Aang lied, and it was really a petty reason why these two groups hate each other. Or he made it out to be that.
It'd be the Great Divide.
But that show, like that episode, made fun of it. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
So even the creators know it was a poor episode.
Oh gosh. Okay. Do you want to sign us off with a line of Secret Tunnel?
I don't remember that. Let me look it up. All right, let's see. I don't know if I could sing it, but I will say it because it's been a while. So two lovers forbidden from one another. A war divides their people, and a mountain divides them apart. Built a path to be together. Yeah, and I forgot the next couple of lines, but then it goes secret tunnels through the mountains. Secret, 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 secret tunnel.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we don't represent the church in any official capacity. Remember to subscribe to the podcast. You can see our show notes and blog posts on latterdaysaintgeeks.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Latter-day Saint Geeks. Music was provided courtesy of David Schradell.